Well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first of the Media Lunch Club's podcasts in this current situation. Instead of a lunch, it's great to be able to talk to our very first guest. So I'm really thrilled, actually, because the first guest is my brother, Will Smith, who's not only my brother, he's also my hero. Deal with that, Will Smith.
Okay. Thank you. Likewise, reciprocated.
Well, that's very sweet of you. I think the reason I say that is, in all seriousness, no one could ask for a finer brother in this world. But I have admired throughout your life your incredible aptitude for hard work. And I guess my opening question is, how hard has it been to go from working in the library in St Helier, Jersey, to where you are now as a multi-award-winning, producer, screenwriter, performer? Tell us how hard it's been.
Well, I just sounds really glib to say it didn't feel that hard because it was sort of what I was doing anyway. So it's just so I've always felt, well, I'm getting paid for what I do for free. Um, so it's just sort of it's my hobby that became my job. So and I also it's like inner madness probably, but I never considered doing anything else. So I was just always very, I just knew that's what I was going to do, even though I've kind of switched streams and done, stand up, although stand up was kind of a way into writing as well. I was sort of following the Ben Elton model, who was a hero of mine when I was growing up, and he'd done stand up to show off his writing and then to get into sort of writing for TV. So, but I did stand up, then writing, and then ventured into acting as well. I always wanted to do all of those things, but it was So it was just a kind of full spectrum push, I suppose.
I mean, it's an extraordinary range, though. When you look down the credits, performing and writing in the thick of it, working on Veep, Emmy award winning. Have you got 2 Emmys? Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Outrageous. I've got none. I mean, none. But Avenue 5 now, working with Hugh Laurie. I know, looking back, Hugh was a huge kind of inspiration to you growing up.
Yeah, it's I still sort of pinch myself when I'm on set looking at Hugh Laurie, and I think, I got his autograph twice when I was growing up, when as a teenager, and then in my 20s, because he ended up sitting behind me at a Ben Elton gig randomly, and then I went to see him do a reading for the Gunseller from his book and got a signed copy then. So it's quite, odd. I'm not going to tell him that. So I hope he's not listening.
I think you
It's
just
slightly
did.
odd. Yeah. But yeah, it was a huge, him and Stephen Fry, huge part of my life, huge influence. I can still recite their, sketches and work on Blackadder by heart. It's kind of, burnt into me now. So it's incredible working with someone of that stature who's been such a big figure in my life, and I'm really lucky enough to have had a few of those encounters now where I feel I've crossed over and met a hero, worked with a hero, and it doesn't wear off the thrill of that.
I think that's the lovely thing about working in this world is you're absolutely right. It's completely thrilling, and I know you've been to a lunch for the Lunch Club, haven't you? Was it with Richard Keel? Is that right?
Yeah, I met Richard Keel, and you're going to have to provide the name. This is terrible. I can't remember the name of the actress. It was Dolly from
Blanche
Moonraker.
Ravaillac. Yeah, Blanche Ravaillac.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, no, fantastic. But that again, that's what I love about the Lunch Club. It's a friendly place, but as you say, it's somewhere where you could feel like you can step over into another realm. You can meet somebody who's obviously done extremely well, or you can connect and network with people who are in different sides of the industry, and that's to me the great value of it. I've got a question here, actually. The first question I'm going to ask is from Steve Blackman. Do you prefer working as an actor or a writer, and which generally pays the most?
Well, they're sort of connected in that if the writing is great, I'd love to, it's something that the acting is great. I often find that, when I'm reading lines, that if the line isn't working as an actor, it's because it's not quite written right, or you kind of learn to adjust things for actors. That's been really helpful, actually. The acting I've done has really helped my writing because you get a sense of, of the rhythms that actors kind of feed off, and also the kind of questions they'll ask about, all those kind of motivation things, that people occasionally mock about, why is my character doing this? Having done it, you do kind of understand where that's coming from and how valid that is. So if I had to choose, I'd probably choose writing, because I'm more in control of that. It's sort of, you're generating the material, and that's what I like. Whereas acting, you can sort of be handed stuff more. So I'd feel, this is my control freak side coming out, basically. I've just realised as I'm saying that, it's basically, yeah, 'cause I'm in charge if I'm writing, whereas if I'm acting, I'm not in charge. But I think also, lifestyle wise, I prefer writing something I can see the family.
Yeah.
Whereas acting, you're kind of, you don't know where you're going to be from kind of one month to the next, and it's fantastically exciting when you're young. But at my age now, I'm kind of, I be at home in the garden.
Yeah.
But I do absolutely love it. As for the money, at my level, the acting, the writing pays better than the acting. But if you hit the acting big, obviously that's a lot. Although then you're paying out for a lot of things as well. Just the management of that kind of lifestyle when you're a massive star is, yeah. I was going to say it's not a stress I'd want, but
Yeah, no, I understand that. I was going to actually ask, in terms of the bigger names you've worked with, and the list is extensive. Are there a few you'd single out who, do have that kind of incredible relationship with the writing team, who you really kind of, it's just adore to work with again?
yeah, all of the cast of Thick of It, Veep, and Avenue 5, and that's really a testament to Armando, because of the kind of, he always works with, he always works with really nice people for a start. That is genuinely something he looks for, is people that can be fun and are going to get on with, and not be in any way problematic. So they're always delightful on a personal level, but because of his, the kind of spontaneity he looks for and the naturalism, they often come from, particularly Americans, because there's more of a tradition of kind of improvisation classes, improvisation clubs, and so the Americans, they all tend to come from an improv background, so they're just so alive to kind of changes and possibilities and just running with stuff. So all the cast he's assembled have just been brilliant for that. So they're really collaborative. They really love the writers. We love them. It's just great. That and I really, I'm very, very lucky to go to work in that kind of environment. It's quite rare, I think, that the way that creates shows.
We've got a couple of questions here that cover the current situation and how it's going to affect the industry. Lucy Daniel Raby wants to ask, how will the COVID pandemic resonate content-wise through future TV shows and films? And isn't there a sort of lockdown element to a lot of comedy and drama anyway? And I think also, in similar territory, John Wolstenholme says the current crisis and resultant lockdown provokes many feelings: anxiety and panic, admiration, distrust, confusion, tolerance, grief, communal spirit, all fertile grounds for writers of comedy, drama, political satire, etc. Would you expect to see a proliferation of productions reflecting the unique situation? And if so, any thoughts on the dominant genre? So 2 COVID questions for you.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because actually, when we're writing the second season of Avenue 5 now, and for people who don't know the premise of it, it's set in the near future, sort of few decades in the future, where space travel has become popular, and an 8-week voyage to Saturn and back turns out to be lasting many years. And as we were writing it this time around, we're like, all right, this is about people stuck in a situation they don't want to be in, being led by idiots. Doesn't seem quite as funny right now, but then we've kind of got through that and thought, no, actually, it is. It's a way of kind of writing about the situation in some regards. I mean, I think in terms of content, I mean, I know that I think some commissioners have been saying we want things that reflect the new reality, and other commissioners are saying we want escapism so that people don't have to confront the new reality. And I can only really speak for a personal point of view. I don't find that my viewing habits have particularly changed. I don't feel a hunger for dystopian drama, and I'm not feeling a sort of hunger for complete escapism. So I don't know. I don't know how it'll change, but it depends how long it goes on. I mean, there are sort of more practical questions, that I've been talking about with people, which is, well, if you have a scene on an airplane, should it now be everyone wearing masks and sitting, one seat apart, or do we pretend it hasn't happened? I mean, it's quite notable that I think pretty much all sort of dramas that have featured American politics in the last sort of 3 4 years haven't referred to Trump. They've just, if you have a president, it's a kind of abstract sort of generic patrician president lurking somewhere in the background. People have sort of not accepted that reality in sort of film. I don't feel, but I think this is coronavirus is such a bigger thing. You can't ignore that. But but because we don't know how long it's going to last. Like if and every there's conflicting kind of reports, and obviously there's people hoping a couple of months, and then there's other people, mainly scientists, saying it could be years. So the longer it goes on, I think then you'd have to reflect it more. But then the practical concern is how you actually film it, and how you film with social distancing, which is a bit of a headache, to be frank. So it's kind of like waiting and see. I mean, I'm sort of have been naively hoping, this will just be a blip and then everything will go back to normal. But it increasingly does not feel that way. So I think it will start to be reflected. And what was the second part of the question?
Second part of the question was, isn't there an element of
Has that
lockdown?
answered both parts?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the lockdown element of comedy. I remember once you wrote a
Yes,
fantastic
yeah,
sitcom. Do you remember that one in setting? Was it Antarctica?
yes, yes. It was. We set a sitcom in an Antarctic research station, and then we reconfigured it later to a space station. So and then yeah, so and then Avenue 5, like I say, that is pretty much a lockdown. They're stuck on a spaceship.
Yeah.
But I think there is definitely the confinement and the pressure cooker of sitcoms. I mean, I'm thinking out loud now, but you definitely feel, even though he sees new people all the time, Basil Fawlty is trapped in that hotel. That's the pressure cooker for him. So yes, you definitely for sitcom, you want to pile on the pressure and the tension, and have people who don't necessarily want to be hanging out being forced together and rubbing each other up the wrong way. So yes, it does lend itself to comedy in that structurally.
Structurally, a little more. So we've got two questions here, both about Apple TV. Gillian Williams and Sarah D both want to know the kind of choreography of how you came to work with Apple TV. Did you pitch to them? Did they come to you? Did you pitch elsewhere before they said yes? Can you talk us through a little bit, as much as you can, of course, with your relationship with Apple?
Yeah, well, that happened. The project with Apple is called Slow Horses, which is based on a brilliant series of spy thrillers by Mick Herron. And obviously, I'm going to recommend them, but I do think they're brilliant. And it's sort of been described as kind of Thick of It meets Le Carré, Thick of It meets Tinker Tailor, because it's set in a department called Slough House, where all the kind of the spies who kind of leave secret folders on buses and mess up in public ways are kind of they're sort of sent there for that's their kind of exile, and they're just given just terrible kind of terrible tasks of drudgery there in the hope that they'll just leave. So they're fantastic books, and we Seesaw, the TV company who do a lot of Steve McQueen's films and did The King's Speech, so they're a really great film TV company. They had the option, and it sort of went around a lot of places, and it never went forward, but not because people didn't like the material or the scripts. It was always a kind of, we don't quite know where to place it, because it's not quite BBC One, not quite BBC Two, was a sort of thing you'd hear, because it was sort of like a thriller, but then there were sort of funny elements, and so it was sort of tonally unlike anything that anyone had. And so but because the books were gaining in popularity, and you could always see that, well, there's an audience for this and it will happen. So we never lost faith with it, but we sort of went around everyone, and everyone loved it, but couldn't sell it upstairs, basically. And then Jay Hunt at Apple read the scripts and said, "Oh, I love these. This is exactly what I'm looking for." And so it kind of went from there. And they've been fantastic. I mean, they've been incredibly supportive. They really want it to happen. They're quite hands off, creatively. They're kind of give us sort of guidance and notes when they're needed. And then we've got Gary Oldman as the lead, so
That's amazing, isn't it?
yeah, it's absolutely amazing, because I mean, he's one of the most incredibly transformative uh, actors. He kind of loses himself in a role like like well, I was going to say like no one else. There's a handful of actors who can do that, and they're just brilliant. And so to get someone of that stature, and the fact that he played Smiley is just wow.
Yeah, I
It's
actually
great.
I love his performance as Smiley. I think it's absolutely up there, and I thought that was an incredible performance. I've got a question here from Susanna Rickman about aspiring writers. Some advice you can give regarding the usual process you go through when you're developing a new concept. Do you pitch the idea? Do you take it to a production company, or do you present them with a full script? Can you give some advice just on how to get going?
Well, it kind of varies, but I think the more you can do, the better. Like if you have a script, then they can really see it, and then you kind of you kind of own it both, well, creatively and in terms of rights, and so it's sort of there for them to see what it is. Whereas if it's a sort of treatment, which again you can pitch kind of, this is my idea for the show, these are the characters, these are the stories, this are my ideas. That's which I kind of you do that anyway as part of the work. But what I always feel is if you've worked out the characters of the story, you're ready to write the script anyway, you may as well do that, and then that really does show the show for what it is. I mean, I always like whenever if I'm asked to write a treatment for something, you always feel I'd probably rather write the script because I'm gonna have to do the work, and then that shows it. Whereas you kind of have to do a treatment, you kind of have to write the script and then boil it down,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. So you kind of, I'd always sort of recommend doing the most amount, really, which it's just the way it's gone. I mean, when I started, you could go just a production company with an idea, and then they would pay you for a script, and then they would take it to a broadcaster. Whereas now, you would probably have to write the script, and then they would take it to a broadcaster, and then you would get paid if they wanted a second script, or if it got made. But you have to do a lot of work up front now, unfortunately. Um, which is much harder. I openly acknowledge it is much harder to break in than it was when I started. Even though there are now obviously there's more channels, so there is kind of more work, but there's also more spec work
I think that's
for you
right,
to get in.
and I think the idea is tested. The metal of the idea is tested in the fire of writing that script. So although it feels like a huge commitment, it's almost for me it's almost like inverted. If the idea is so amazing that you cannot help but keep going back to it and keep writing it and keep honing it, then that sort of speaks to the quality of it, I think, and also to your commitment, which I think is vital if you're going to really do this. Because like you, I know that productions can last years. This isn't just something you're going to develop, sell, move on. It's a huge part of your life.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so you have to enjoy doing it. And I always think if you're enjoying doing it, that is an extremely good sign. And it's not that there isn't hard work and bits where you're slightly banging your head against the desk, but that's all part of it. I've kind of learnt to accept that the sort of the days where I feel I'm staring out the window, not getting much done, are still work days, because you're kind of figuring out stuff. Even sometimes you figure it out in the background, sort of subconsciously, basically. But you kind of you need those kind of almost static days of just absorbing stuff and inching forward and working out, and then the kind of the full flow of stuff comes later. But both kind of days are valid work days, if you see what I mean. And I would always encourage people not to beat themselves up if they feel they haven't achieved stuff, because you don't know what it's leading to. You have to have those kind of on paper, literally on paper, less productive days to be able to get the stuff on paper later.
Yeah, well said. Final question is from Julie Foy, who wants to talk about book adaptations. So she and Karen Newman have got an option on a book, and they're veering towards TV with it. They're wondering, have you adapted a book? What stage do you think it's right to start pitching? I know you've actually written in addition to all the other things, mainlanding your book, which is brilliant. So can you give some advice on book adaptations as well?
Yes, well, yes, because the Apple Show is adapted from books.
Of course.
Uh, so I think if you, yeah. So yes, I have done this, and also hopefully we have the option to adapt another book that I absolutely love that I'm just going to recommend, called Now We Shall Be Entirely Free by Andrew Miller, who is one of my favorite writers. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and that's a fantastic kind of it's sort of an adventure thriller in 18th century Britain. Uh, Very kind of a man being pursued by an enemy he isn't aware of. I'm not really pitching this as well as I should. I should have had the pitch nailed, and now I've got the rights to do the book. I've lost the memory of the pitch of it, but it's do read all of Andrew Miller's books. But now we should be entirely free is incredibly gripping and evocative. It's a beautiful book. Anyway, and with that was me reading it basically. I knew, and one of the other producers on Slow Horses is a great American producer called Gail Matrucks, and she had tried to get a previous book by Andrews called Ingenious Pain, another brilliant book, turned into a film and hadn't managed. And I knew she'd worked on that, and I knew she loved his work, and so I read his latest book and said, I think this would be a fantastic film, and so that's how that happened. That is through having a connection with somebody who'd already tried to adapt his book. But if you've got a book you love, then I think you kind of, you can't just give the broadcaster the book. You have to sort of give them a kind of, you still have to do the pitch, the treatment for the show, how you would adapt it, give them the book as well. It's not that likely they'll read the book, if I'm honest. There is, yeah, and and I get that. Often they're kind of like, well, it has to stand on its own as a TV show, so I shouldn't have to read the book to understand the script, which is that's an argument for the viewer. But I do think if you're kind of looking at how a book is adapted, it probably helps to be familiar with the book. So yeah, it's probably the same. It's not that different from pitching a kind of original idea. But obviously, if the book has been well received or is selling by the truckload, like Normal People, I imagine was not a hard pitch, because it's a fantastic novel, amazing reviews, great sales. So for a broadcaster, they're like, yes, we've got a very current, that's kind of a no-brainer. So if you've got a book that's already a runaway success, then you'll kind of, the door is kind of more open. Whereas if it's just a sort of book that you really, really love, that it hasn't perhaps had as wide a readership, then you'll have to sort of sell it as if it were an original idea, probably.
Well, thanks so much for your time today. I know you're a busy fellow, so I won't keep you too much longer. But finally, for this inaugural Media Lunch Club podcast, I thought it'd be rather nice if you could briefly explain the Tower of Bergerac, and then I will challenge you once you've explained the concept. I'm taking you back in time to a previous life, but for those who don't know, over to you.
I may be a bit rusty, but yes, the original idea was me and my dear friend and writing partner Roger Drew used to watch a lot of Bergerac because we grew up in Jersey, and it used to amuse us. And so we were watching it, this was in the noughties or whatever, and just marveling at the number of guest stars that then either were famous at the time or went on to be incredibly famous. And so one of us was like, you could do a 6 degrees of separation, and so that became 6 degrees of Bergerac. Which then became part of my radio show, the Tower of Bergerac. But the 6 degrees idea was that if you give me a film, I can link it to a specific episode of Bergerac through the actors in 6 moves or less, and that became a part of my live stand-up show, was to be challenged by the audience. And when I was doing that night after night, I was unbeatable. But right now, I'm not so sure. So
well, I'm going to make it easy.
Maybe rusty up.
I think I'll pick one of your favourite movies. Let's not say it's your favourite movie of all time. Your challenge is to link to an episode of Bergerac in 6 moves or less. The movie Moonraker.
Moonraker is it is a wonderful film and a wonderful score, a wonderful script. I just love that film. So I saw it exactly the right time. I was 8, so it hit me. Moonraker stars the great Michel Lonsdale as the best Bond villain of all time, Hugo Drax. And he was in a film called The Ronin with Natasha McElhone, who was in episode 79, Snow in Provence.
It's just absolutely incredible. You didn't even.
I think it was episode. It might be episode 69. I might have got that wrong, but it's definitely called A Snow in Provence.
Well, you're such an extraordinary mind. Look, on behalf of the Media Lunch Club, thank you so much for doing this. It's wonderful to hear you, and we hope very much to welcome you to a lunch in the not too distant future.
I'd love that. Thank you so much.